Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Eleanor Carruthers, the Commercial Content Executive at IGB, and I'll be chairing today's webinar. We're delighted to be hosting this webinar with Symphony Solutions and UnderDefense, discussing cybersecurity challenges within iGaming. In iGaming, cybersecurity matters not just from a compliance perspective, but challenges also include fraudulent activities, data leaks, and general hindrances to long-term innovation. Today, we're joined by Eduardo Remedios, VP of iGaming at Symphony Solutions, Nazar, founder of UnderDefense, Giannella, Borg, Information and Security Team Lead at Catena Media. In today's webinar, we're going to cover two main areas, followed by a Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to submit questions throughout, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Our first section will cover cases on how leading European online gaming companies are continuously targeted by malefactors and building their cyber resiliency in production and internal networks. We'll talk about cloud security, fraud, and DDoS, and countermeasures to avoid business interruption. And then we'll move on to discuss the secure products that can help operators to prepare and mitigate these risks. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our speakers. Just to give our audience a bit of context to start off, I'm going to head over to you, Giannella and Nazar. Would you mind just explaining a little bit about the relationship between IT and cybersecurity?
Thank you. So very often in iGaming businesses, the new businesses and well-established businesses, ITs and product development are key drivers for business success. And what I've discovered in my personal practice that very often, if it's a startup, iGaming platform or affiliate or some others entity in this domain, there is an issue that on the beginning, cybersecurity is undervalued. And adding security later may create a very dramatic situation for a business. And the right way of doing it is to actually start adding security from the beginning, from the design perspective, because iGaming is very suited domain for hackers, for attackers, where they can earn a lot of money because fines and compliance is critical for this domain. Because, as example, one day of business interruption for major iGaming operators may cost them between 40 to 50 millions in average, and this kind of giants, they can afford to move forward. Bigger and smaller companies is who own what kind of roles and responsibilities. Very often I see a situation when security directors report to technical officer or CIO, and there is often a fight between the teams, which is counterproductive. So according to best practices and recommendation for organization like in US NIST, CISO have to report directly to CIO and be controlling role for an IT to a product development, as well as to have a capability to report and escalate the issues to a board. And also what we see that very often, if we talk about what cybersecurity do in iGaming, it's not about just making products secure by design. Very often it's also about people, and security officers have a lot of things to do besides just a pen testing for application. I can I'd be happy if you can elaborate more on it.
Yeah, sure. I guess first thing that came to my mind when you asked about the relationship between IT and cybersecurity is the love-hate relationships, right? Because it depends from where you look at it, of course, but indeed it's a team sport, right? So you obviously have various roles at play. You have the defenders, attackers, and the builders from the security side, and you obviously have to collaborate with other teams in order to get things done. So essentially, from the security side, you have the good communicator and the jack of all trades, as I call it, that can collaborate well with other groups and with other organizations. So ultimately, it will be difficult, perhaps impossible, to even implement what you find as a security lead or as a member of the security team during an incident, or before, to prevent, or after detection and after response. So my answer would be, yeah, it's a team sport. So that's the relationship that exists between security and the rest of the IT resources in the company.
Yeah,
Nazar,
absolutely.
earlier we were. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, please go on.
I just want to add, that many, very often there is expectation, between CIO and product, development team, that security have just to make sure that product will be released secure, and that's why they heavily rely on the just a pen testing, and pen testing is an exercise which allows you to get a snapshot of your product, platform, solution in specific time frame, but very often it's also depend on the rest of the organization. And if you don't have visibility on this, people, assets, your DevOps team, there should be someone who is in control of it. We recently had a very interesting case. If you could show next slide, it will be about it. When one compromised user account in Azure Cloud, created a situation when the attackers were able to take down the whole customer infrastructure in the cloud. And this is very often the case when gaming providers believe that when they shift everything up to the cloud, it will make a difference. Giannella, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so with regards to, we're talking about resilience, right?
Apologies. Yeah, cloud really, if moving to the cloud really help product to become more secure and resilient.
I see. Again, the cloud usually is like the notion, yeah, I'm on the cloud, look at me. It's like something to show, right? The important thing about the cloud is obviously having the right skills and the right team to be able to operate in the cloud. And you have to first, before actually doing that, you have to look back. Is my business meant to be on the cloud? Are we meant to have microservices? Are we meant to operate? Is the business model made for the cloud? That's the first thing, of course. And then you have to scale up your team to be able to support the cloud. Being on the cloud just for the sake of it is just having a Tesla, for just branding it like that, right? So yeah, obviously there is much more to the cloud than first meets the eye. Obviously any company can be on the cloud if they're obviously geared for it, right? So yeah, that would be my take on it for sure.
I have also a question to you. As a person who have more than 15 years of hands-on experience, in let's say old-fashioned IT security and very fancy modern cloud security. Your humble opinion, where you have more control over your assets, in a cloud or in a on-prem old infrastructure?
I guess, well, for Catena Media, right? We're a company with 2,600 brands. That's a lot of brands. So obviously having everything in the cloud is easily having everything in a single pane of glass. You can easily hook that data to a SIEM, for example, and you can analyze the data at one go. With on-prem, it's obviously the bigger you are, the more difficult it is to manage on-prem. And we originally, when I joined Catena Media, we were a mix, right? And now we are trying to consolidate everything. So I kind of felt the difference between on-prem and different kinds of clouds, and then trying to consolidate everything into one cloud. It's obviously easier. Again, needing the expertise, you have to have team geared up from the technical aspect to the security aspect. So if you have a DevOps team, you obviously need to fill that gap with DevSecOps. You cannot have a traditional security engineer that is not skilled on cloud. You have either to invest from the get-go in someone that understands the cloud or skill that person up. So for me, I definitely would see the benefit of the cloud. But again, it depends on the size. If you are smaller, you can go with on-prem. There are less considerations about trying to conceal your data. Obviously, on the cloud, everything is out there, everything is exposed. Then you have to start to configure down and start to reduce the exposure that your assets have. Whereas with on-prem, you have to work the other way around. You just expose what you need, and that's it. Just maintain. With the cloud, it's always trying to understand what the new features are and what you need to do to keep everything safe. So obviously there's a balance, I guess. It depends on the business, and this is why I mentioned that you need to assess and understand, I guess.
Thank you. On this slide, we have very good visualization for one of the cases which recently happened to, one very good and big company. And it's also about exactly the cloud case, because it was a compromised Azure account which was detected, and it was a small tiny anomaly, because one of the users was behaving, employees of the company was behaving differently, and all of us should realize that if our product we build and product we deliver to our customers is product which is developed by people and our employees, and DevOps team, IT team, some people in marketing team, and all of them, many of them have different level of success. And if there can be a situation when IT administrator, highly privileged personalities accounts can be compromised, and it's very well known that there is many cyber extortion cases nowadays across the internet, with ransomware, with threatening the users about exposing some information about them. Many businesses have no clue that every employee is a target, and having visibility across IT assets and human resources about watching what your employee are doing, especially working from home, it's a big threat. So like in this case, a small tiny anomaly became a very big incident where we spent 7 hours online with our customer, investigating what happened, when happened, because it was very, very privileged cloud admin account which get exposed, which was misused by attackers. Old known strategy was to mine Bitcoin, and even worse strategy for any business, especially business in the cloud, is actually to take over the cloud accounts and run and ask for a ransom. There was a case, you can Google it, under the title "Murder in a Cloud." It was about the company who was absolutely wiped from the cloud because even their backups were located in the same user account. So took over of that account was absolute death for them. So they lost their business. And this is the risks which each of us have to keep in mind. And if we talk about the risks, there is a very good strategy which helps any kind of business to actually build a program which will be, solid, consistent, and will help businesses to recover from any breach, because it will happen, later, sooner. The strategy is called cyber resiliency. Giannella, maybe you can, elaborate more on it. And maybe we can switch to the next slide.
Yes, for sure. So obviously sorry for that company, of course, but again, maybe just to tie into what you mentioned, one last thing before we switch to cyber resiliency. It's not just technology, right? We have a saying probably when we did any certification in information security, we say people, process, technology, all three together, not just technology. We cannot discount the other two. So definitely agree with you. There needs to be a strategy behind the cloud. It's not just, getting the Tesla for the sake of having a Tesla. But anyway, switching back to cyber resiliency, again, the word in itself, it's a process, right? You cannot say, yeah, I am cyber resilient now, hands crossed, feet on the table, all done. It's something that you achieve, first of all, you achieve slowly over time. And even if you are in a comfortable position, you can never say, okay, now I'm in a comfortable position, I am cyber resilient. You have to continue working towards it, right? Again, it improves over time, and it's about achieving the right balance as well. So again, it's not just the technologies, right? I cannot say, yeah, I bought a bunch of tools, now I'm cyber resilient, I can check everything. You need the people behind it. You need people to run the tools, people to obviously extract the information from the tool, maybe using a SIEM, maybe just directly, and then using that well-informed skill set of people to create the processes to continue on the good work that you've done. So it's a long-term process that I see. And again, it's those three components that work together, really. That's the way I see it.
From your experience, what is low-hanging fruit? How companies can start, building their cyber resiliency program?
So from my experience here at Catena Media, obviously I joined a year ago. We started out a security team. We first saw that we needed the visibility. All those brands, perhaps teams working in different silos, working differently. The collection of information into a centralized, I was alone for 8 months, I think, or 7 months. So I had to try to understand what's going on. So visibility, and then building the technologies based on the data. Obviously, if you have the data, it's much better to, show the executives what needs to be done. It's clearly defined with back data. It's obviously better. Probably Eduardo would agree here, being a VP.
That's true. I think a lot of the things that you've mentioned, they're all really key points. But from a company point of view, certainly it's definitely not a question of ticking the box and saying, right, we are resilient and putting your feet up on the table. It's a continual thing. The other key point is that to really embrace this and to make sure that security is embedded into the product design and your software development lifecycle, that's actually a mindset. So you need to be thinking about that as a company. And you need to also educate the people that you already have. And during the process, you may identify that you actually are missing some key roles. So certainly, I would say one important thing from a business point of view is to make sure that it's actually here in your head, that you're actually, cognizant of the fact that cybersecurity is something that you need to be thinking about all of the time for all of those brands that you mentioned and for the enterprise as a whole. Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, there is a saying in information security that is security needs to be built in and not bolted on. It's even better if it's part of the process. It's always the better idea, of course. Yeah.
But if you are running, from zero to hero, if you like a young company with, let's say, 2 years on the market, and you bring in your product, your game, very often most of compliances require you to run a pen test. What is your experience with it? Is it really panacea? Is it really, ticking the box, having the confidence that okay, we tested our product. These hackers were not able to break it.
Yeah, in iGaming, I guess pen test is part of the regulatory process, right? And many companies take it as just a tick off the box. But in reality, a pen test is just a snapshot, right? It's only a very, a one-time idea of what your product suite looks like. The important thing is to either do it in a more frequent do it more frequently and as part of a holistic process rather than depending, okay, pen test is good, we can move on with our life. I mean, it's always better, right, to have a process around pen test. You have to identify maybe what is your weakness at that point in time and work on it as a holistic approach in information security. Obviously, some identifications that the pen test find are crucial, right? It might identify some lackings in the way you do things, but ultimately it's just a snapshot of what's happening. A pen tester might not discover some other things. So definitely a one-time exposure. I would include it as part of the information security strategy, but I would not completely depend on it, because after all, it's an attestation. I'm not sure about you, Eduardo. What do you think about it?
Well, yes. I mean, as I've seen over the last number of, quite a few years, it's often, as you said, seen as it's almost a bullet point that sits under the table over a non-functional requirement. So it sits over there. It's almost like an afterthought. So really, and we'll come to this a little bit later on with some of our slides to come, where we're actually talking about the difference between being reactive and being proactive. And obviously, it's important to be thinking ahead. There's a slide that we'll go through a little bit later on that Nazar is going to talk about, where we show the difference in terms of cost when you are scrambling to try and fix an issue that's cropped up, as opposed to spending some efforts earlier on in the initial design process of your product. There's certainly an advantage into doing that work earlier on, which brings me back to that whole mindset. So once you think about it from a kind of product development point of view, and bring together the left and the right hands in the organization and work together as one whole team, then absolutely you'll benefit far more. So those are key takeaways, I would say there. We have one more point on here, think as a hacker, and this one is a really interesting one. Perhaps Nazar, you would like to pick up on that one.
Thank you. I'm actually an ethical hacker with 18 years of hands-on experience. When I was a kid, before my university, and one of things which really, in my more middle ages, pushed me to think, what's going wrong? Why developers can't, build code, good from scratch, right? Because I was doing many pen tests, and and like 95% of them were very successful. So it was plenty of critical findings there. The problem was that developers are very often simple engineers, which are told what to do, what functionality you want to complete on that product, and they do just that part. And if we talk about the building product secure by design, that means that there should be someone who will wear that black hat and think, okay, how my game may be misused, how I have to protect my customers. Should it be some input filtering? Should it be some web application firewall? Should it be some kind of additional crypto encryption? There should be someone who will set the requirements and educate, exactly like you both correctly mentioned, educate the developers to build products which will be secured, because it's way easier to protect and the products which are well designed. Pen tests very often, if it is well protected by web application firewall, will not show you the good result. But if it's about just the time and persistence of an attacker, we see that, as example, in US, it's a huge buzz because every major big organization get hacked. Even FireEye, one of the most famous cybersecurity firms, they were breached. You can go and check FireEye stock, and you will see that at the moment where these guys admitted that they get breached, stock was on the top, then it fall down for 50% of its value, and then it's jump again because these guys show that another 13,000 organizations were compromised. If we talk about product development, I believe Giannella can cover more about it, because you guys have so many brands and products.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is that when a developer develops a feature, it instantly shows, right? If you have a new responsive site, I mean, okay, it's not like an exciting feature, but if they develop a new feature like consolidation or reporting or whatever, they build, I don't know, a feature for their gaming website, it shows immediately. Whereas we're just trying to predict and prevent something that has not yet happened. So it's always trying to sell what people cannot see, right? With security. So yeah, definitely, it's a challenge in that aspect, right? When it comes to security features and being one step ahead. But luckily, I guess now with the eventuality of DevOps and with DevSecOps, being part of the DevOps culture, it is much easier because we have a place at the table, right, with the rest of the DevOps teams. So maybe, as we can see here in the presentation, security finally started shifting left, right? And probably it was a shock in the beginning, because it's like, okay, what do we need to learn as a security team? Because again, security was always a jack of all trades. Now we need to create infrastructure as code. We need to create static analysis to really understand what a security issue is. It's not a matter of taking that pile of paper, putting it on someone else's desk, and go fix it. Oh, no, you fix it. You're part of the DevOps team now. So help us design, help us build, and then help us be part of the journey with us, which obviously brought its challenges with an unprepared team. But luckily now, with the eventuality of the cloud, with tooling, building security around some tooling that can improve your DevOps culture, it's getting much better. Obviously, the security engineer needs to keep up with the times, right? And definitely something that we need to keep up with in the long run, for sure. So yeah.
Thank you. If we go forward and talk about the things which any company who attended this webinar can take away with them and go to their DevOps team. There is a bunch of practices which you can evaluate right away, right after this webinar, and this is called OWASP web application OWASP software security maturity model. So it's a OWASP SAM, software assurance, because there is quality assurance and there is no security assurance. It's like buying very expensive, very sexy car, but there was no crash test for that car done, right? So for every product there should be a crash test, and there should be also people who will watch the application which is on production. As an example, I have a very good case when we engaged with very good big gaming operator. They were losing hundreds of thousands of euro monthly because they were a victim of fraud. Why? Because when it was on production, like on a slide, it was released, but then people, developers, DevOps were focused on building new features. So they were focusing not on a product which is live already and watching what is going on with that product, but focusing on the new features. It's very common, mistake that growing businesses are doing. They are not watching their legacy. Infrastructure products very often become in legacy, and in iGaming there is always a way for fraud, for manipulation, for small tiny security breaches, and I guess this is exactly the same like with Enigma, crypto machine, which happened to Germans. If you break into some gaming company and you have a ability, you know, to stay for years and, you know, get, let's say, a few hundred, you know, not a few hundred, maybe, you know, a few $1,000, you know, to your account through some tiny vulnerability, you will never do anything to expose that vulnerability to someone. So it's a way of attackers, how they think. If we talk about, maybe if we go to the next slide, there is a very good representation from this of our software assurance maturity model. May I ask you to switch to the next slide? Yep, thank you. So this is, you know, a very good recommendation, you know, from UnderDefense, where you can start, where you can go. It can be Google spreadsheet, it can be Excel spreadsheet, where you can go and ask your product managers and your, you know, director of engineering, as well as your DevOps leads, you know, where we are with it, what is our maturity level for this, and, you know, as example, where we are with, you know, security awareness trainings or threat modeling, because, you know, the later you are in your production cycle, the harder it is for you to fix this defects that were often an architectural issue. And if you can go further, you know, it's material from Eduardo, you know, and result of IBM research, how much companies are spending if they have this kind of issues in their development lifecycle.
That's right. Thank you, Nazar. This kind of illustrates a point I made earlier on about ensuring that your attention is focused sooner rather than later. So if we go to the far right here, if something is already live in production and you have an incident there, the cost there of remedying that can be vastly higher than the cost associated with remedying it on the far left, right? If you think about it, if as Giannella said, you had a security professional, DevOps, engaged when you're actually conceptualizing and building and designing the software, when you're creating the requirements for it, then at most you might have spent some time in meetings. Perhaps you've created a few Jira tickets and some product documentation, and then you catch it. That's far less costly than trying to unravel a big ball of string when the system is live. So yes, absolutely. The advice here, the takeaway is to try to focus your attention at the earliest possible times. Do you remember years ago, we used to always laugh about QAs. You know, developers would throw the code over the hedge, so to speak, to the QA team, say, go and test that. And things have obviously improved vastly, and now QAs are there in the earliest stages. And what we're saying here is let's do the same with our security professionals as well. Absolutely. Thanks, Nazar. Perhaps if we go on to the next slide then, unless you have something there, Giannella.
Yeah, something minor really. And luckily with DevSecOps, right, we can also plug into the CICD pipeline. Obviously with the expert team, as part of the development lifecycle, we can always collaborate with the testing team. So people don't just throw it over the hedge, you know, into the next garden, who cares? So it's obviously a collaborative effort where the processes involve different teams that work together. And if something is flagged as insecure, it goes back at least one step, right? And we try to fix it at that step. And if it doesn't work, then we fix it at the previous step. And obviously, in the long run, we could figure out a way of how to improve whatever we are doing. So it's a collaboration, right? Yeah, that's only what I wanted to add, sorry.
And element of culture, because, you know, as you correctly mentioned, you know, even if there is a guys who will notify you, hey, you are exposed, your MongoDB server, you know, it have become public available because someone was trying to troubleshoot some issue of access, and you know, they just, you know, delete this firewall rule on your AWS. You know, sometimes if there is no culture of effective cooperation, it may take hours or days to close the gap. Sometimes it also takes days to actually, if you notified that from some external researcher that you have a problem with your data and your data is leaking. I have seen the organization which were fixing the this kind of gaps, open Elastic or open MongoDB for 2-3 days. It's a simple firewall rules, but very often it's the question who owns the asset, and how to properly forward the message and request to the right person who have the access to that system, and close it on firewall or take the system down.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Again, perhaps I mentioned this earlier, right? I think I'd like to believe we've moved on from the time where security just took the stack of papers and put it on someone else's desk, right? It's a collaboration. And luckily, right, with the eventuality of the DevSecOps, we are now part of that culture, and it's no longer their firewall, their system, it's all our system. We all help in improving it, right? And everyone has a little bit of knowledge of everything, but ultimately someone is the database guy in the DevOps team, someone is the security person in the DevOps team, and so on and so forth. So we all help in protecting the same resources ultimately.
Yep, absolutely agree. As the takeaways, in new paradigm of 2021, when we see that many businesses like Garmin, I guess it was a very famous case for many runners across Europe and US. Garmin was a great example, of successful company which was growing like a rocket, because navigation is critical for everything. But every company can be hacked, and the difference between successful and unsuccessful companies is how good they are ready to deal with the incident. This can be achieved through regular practice and exercises, simulation of these attacks. What as example, as a pen testing firm, what we notice that our customer often ask us to do pen tests, but don't task their defenders team to watch what we are doing on their production. And it's a big issue, because these guys are not learning from new techniques which we show them. They don't have this visibility, they don't have SIEM logs, so they don't have security operations center, and they became blind. And if the first problem is to discover that you are under attack, that there is a threat. Another problem is to build the right reaction on it. The right reaction is also an element of culture and cooperation, and that's why security directors, engineers should have direct access to board, to CEO, because very often when the breach happened, especially in Europe, if it's with a very strict regulation, and once again, security is not about just the compliance. Compliance is more very good driver for cybersecurity. It's about the practical things. It's a matter if iGaming company get breached, if some game is compromised, how we communicate from marketing perspective, from legal perspective to all our consumers, because their data belong to us as a gaming companies. And it's a readiness. Cyber resiliency is about building this readiness, preparing for a worst case scenario, for the case when we get encrypted by ransomware, when we get exposed. And the good companies, they actually think ahead about it, wearing this hat, hiring the security professionals like Giannella to actually drive this process, to share their thoughts to a board, to realize the risk. Because what I noticed from my MBA study, many managers prefer to lie about the real situation in their business, especially sales managers, right? IT don't want also to be blamed for the delays of new releases. So they prefer to take a risk and release on production, having a poor product, having, not having the right team of, DevSecOps or security engineers or QA who know some part of security, or, skipping the pen test, or, not patching the system after having the vulnerability alert from the average vulnerability scanner. So it's a big issue. Without having these people who will articulate the proper risk to you, managers can take wrong decisions, and it can cost money, or it can cost you the whole business which you was building for many years. It's about maturity of C-level executives who have to, bring these people to their businesses. Eduardo, what do you think?
Well, I absolutely agree. I think the key thing here, like I said, and I'll say it again, is to be as proactive as you can be, right? And to seek input from people. I always say I hire people that know more about their area than I do, right? So it is a specialized area. So of course, I would be an advocate of getting specialists in who know more about it than we do. But it's the owners, actually there is a responsibility of the CEO fundamentally to make sure that the level of security and that he or she is doing everything possible to ensure that they are as secure as they can be, right? That's the key thing, because at the end of the day, they have a responsibility to their end customers, and that's a key thing. So we always talk about being customer focused, and security and having a high level of security is one of those things that's very important. That's my opinion, certainly. I'm conscious that we are approaching the end of the webinar. We have about 15 minutes here. Perhaps we want to open up some questions. Elena, I don't know if we have any already.
Absolutely, we do have
coming in.
Super. We do indeed. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing these insights. And we do have a few questions. So actually, Eduardo, I'm going to come to you first. So you did touch on this earlier, but why would you say most gaming products are built without security in mind? And how does this help malefactors to target them by staying under their radar? Would you say that's just along the lines of what you were saying about how people just don't think about it enough in advance until it essentially happens?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, a lot of it is, and it's not just about security, but things become a habit, habits become rituals, and then that's part of the culture. And that's why I talked about it being kind of a transformation, right? If you really want to change things, then you need to actually think about how will you change, right? So whether you're trying to become more agile as a business, that's also a transformation. But being more aware from a security point of view, that's a transformative process as well. So first of all, it's about mindset and education, I would say. Nazar touched on it as well, as actually having a look inwards to see where are you on the spectrum. We talk about people being good, being better, and being awesome in terms of security. So you have to be honest with yourselves as an enterprise and look at where do you think you are. Where are the areas that need to be addressed. From a sort of hacker's point of view, their whole intention is to remain below the radar. For them, success is not being flagged. So yes, that's the other side of the whole equation, really. They're trying to remain below the radar, and we're trying to make sure that they can't access or compromise the systems that we have.
Brilliant, thank you. Actually, another question that we have that's sort of along those lines is, so obviously over the last year, a lot of companies have been working from home, and slowly but surely we're starting to come out of that. But for a significant period of time, we have been working at home. So how much has that increased the chance of there being a data breach?
Giannella, let's just, you are a big company, you have plenty of employees. What was your experience there?
Well, obviously, going home from the office and changing the culture completely and the way we operate to operate entirely from home was a challenge, right? Working from home if it does increase the chance for a data breach, obviously it depends on how you operated before working from home and how you ended up operating. Luckily for us, we are a cloud centric company, right? So we already had many things on the cloud. We just needed to work on a few bits and pieces. So it didn't change much for us. However, I think with the companies having to redesign the way they worked in order to support working from home due to COVID, it is a challenge, right? And there are many things that have changed in that case. So probably it might, right? Obviously, the supporting team might do all the difference. If we were equipped with a security team before, it might have been easier. I had just been with Catena for a month, and then COVID struck, and what's going on? Like, it felt like a bit surreal at the time, but yeah, I mean, now pat on the back, I've experienced a pandemic, and I'm here right now, so I guess proud moment. But yes, imagine like being in a company with no security expertise, and the IT team or the tech team are trying to compensate for that lacking. It must have been insane, and probably right without the right expertise, the right tooling, and the right processes. Again, tying into process, people, and technologies, the chances increase. But obviously, probably even for security, the chances of getting jobs in information security in many companies increased, right? So there is more need for security teams. So yeah, the direct answer would be probably yes, but it also depends on the situation before. So yeah, in our case, it didn't do much of a difference. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Giannella. I think it's an interesting question, and for many companies, it may not have been something that they'd considered so much before, but definitely will be now. Another question that we have is, what new trends and emerging technologies are there from actually a customer point of view?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Emerging technologies from a customer point of view and new trends.
In cybersecurity?
So maybe,
yep, please.
Yeah, in iGaming, for sure, with the eventuality of COVID, I guess it was esports, right? People, companies trying to make the best out of the situation. Or in cybersecurity, I guess with that eventuality, nothing much changed. It's yeah, trying to deliver a different product, but probably involving new business partnerships during a pandemic that might have been challenging, but luckily nothing much changed in that perspective.
Thank you, Giannella. Eduardo, we've actually got one for you. What recommendations do you have for teams who are struggling with getting visibility at the top sort of executive level?
That's a very interesting question. I would say to just try to have an open conversation with one of those, somebody that you have who is an influencer there. Talk to them and explain to them perhaps the need and the importance behind that. I mean, obviously it's a bit varied because I'm not sure what the details of the question are there. But I would say, yeah, if you're lacking visibility about the importance of security, let's assume that's the thrust of the question, then see if you can find somebody that you can speak to informally, perhaps, and just explain to them why you think it's important. See if you can get a slot with them. Perhaps you can arrange to do a short presentation or a slot at your next C-level meeting. And I think it's really about showing your fears, if you like. If you have a concern that perhaps as a company you're not doing enough, maybe you've stumbled upon something that you think needs to be escalated, then I think it's a question of putting your hand up and saying, excuse me, can I please talk to you about this? That would be my advice. So communication really is what it comes down to.
Let me add something on top of it. In many cases, for a business owner, it's very important to have a proactive approach from their, vice presidents, engineer, for people who they report directly, escalating the risk and proposing solution. Because if the CEO is hearing about the problems that happen to their competitor or their friends in the same industry, in the same domain, if they will came and ask you as a CIO or CISO or VP of engineering about how good we are in cybersecurity, what do you do? Are we compliant? What is our progress there? It will make your reputation down, and you will have to report them, with all answers. It's bad when the CEO is coming to you and asking about the risk. It's better, when you escalate the risk and propose a solution to cover it. This is one, and the second one is the best scenario to explain the risks to C-level executives, to show what happened recently or in the last few years to the similar companies in a similar domain, and explaining that, okay, these guys will happen to us, earlier or later. It will happen anyway. So once again, bad companies and good companies are different in a way how they prepared to some situation. Incidents are happening all the time. There is difference between companies who have visibility what's going on with them and companies who don't have a clue what's going on in their production.
Yeah, it's a good point, Nazar. And just one more thing. Quite often, and I'm just kind of reading between the lines a little bit on this question, it's a very good one. Quite often it comes down to prioritization. So if you're trying to get something prioritized at an exec level, if you can show them the cost of delay in not doing that thing, right, that'll pretty quickly open up their eyes. And we talked about it earlier on. The cost of delay of not doing something can be enormous if it's done very late. So have a think amongst yourselves and think about what the cost of delay to the business would be if X wasn't done. And then I think you will probably find that you have an audience that's ready to listen.
I think we have time for one more question, which is actually for Nazar, which is, are there unique challenges for the USA compared to European markets?
As far as I have seen, because we work very closely with both markets in US, Canada, and Europe. So in Europe, iGaming industry is way more mature, but in US it's growing very quickly. As example, and the prices, are also a big difference. As example, if an average pen test in Europe it is between 10 to 25,000 euro. So in US it is 45,000 euro, max $45,000. And in US there is a culture of faster. In Europe, people are more wisely. I can say slower, but they think more about the risks, and I would say it's more mature at the moment in Europe than in US. But iGaming industry is growing, and it have a very big potential, as well as very attractive for malefactor.
Thank you so much for that, Nazar. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. That is all that we have time for. But thank you so much again, all of you, for joining us today and sharing these insights around cybersecurity and iGaming. It's been a really interesting discussion. It's been so great to hear your expertise on these topics. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand shortly on igamingbusiness.com. So keep an eye out for the recording. And until then, we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.